Ever thought of the Bible as a fruit basket? Well, let's take a bite and see what we find. If you're like me, you've heard countless stories from the Bible, some of which might have left you scratching your head. Today we're going to dig deep into two of those tales that have been a bit, shall we say, embellished over time, so grab your shovel or perhaps a pair of tweezers as we pluck away at these myths and see what we uncover. Let's start with the juicy one, the infamous apple in the Garden of Eden. Now, if you've been picturing Eve biting into a shiny red apple, I hate to break it to you, but it's time to update that mental image. The Bible, in its original form, never specifies the type of fruit that Eve and Adam partook in. It was simply referred to as fruit. An apple, a pear, a pomegranate, who knows? Maybe it was a fruit salad. This common misconception likely originated from a linguistic mix-up. The Latin word malus can mean both apple and evil. So when St. Augustine, who loved a good metaphor, translated the text, he might have seen an opportunity for a symbolic play on words, or perhaps he just wasn't that good at biblical botany. Either way, apples everywhere have been trying to shake off this bad reputation ever since. Now let's dive into our second myth, the tale of poor Jonah, who was supposedly swallowed by a whale. The actual biblical text refers to a great fish. Now, I'm no marine biologist, but last I checked, a whale isn't a fish. So why the whale? Well, it might have been a bit of artistic license taken by translators and storytellers over the centuries. After all, swallowed by a great fish doesn't have quite the same dramatic ring to it, does it? But let's not get too tied up in the species of Jonah's unexpected host. The point of the story isn't about a man's 3-day stint in a fishy hotel room. It's a tale of disobedience, repentance, and forgiveness. And if we're to believe Thomas Aquinas, one of the great theologians of the Middle Ages, the great fish was merely a symbol of the grave, swallowing Jonah in his disobedience and spitting him out again in his repentance. It seems Aquinas might have been a bit of an early adopter of marine symbolism, so there you have it. Two biblical tales that have been a tad distorted through mistranslation and misinterpretation over the centuries. The next time you hear about Jonah's whale of a tale or the infamous apple, remember the Bible is a bit more complex than your Sunday school felt board might suggest. But that's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? The layers of meaning, the room for interpretation, the human element that has shaped these stories over the centuries. It's a reminder that even the most sacred texts are a product of human hands and minds, influenced by culture, language, and a dash of imagination. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep laughing, because sometimes the truth is even stranger than the myth. And remember, an apple a day might keep the doctor away, but it won't necessarily keep you out of trouble in the Garden of Eden. And if you ever find yourself swallowed by a great fish, well, I hope you brought your snorkel. And now let's dive into the linguistic labyrinth of the Bible. Our third myth on the chopping block today is a classic. Money is the root of all evil. You might have heard this one from a well-meaning relative when you asked for a raise in your allowance. But let's set the record straight. The actual verse from 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils." So if you've been eyeing that piggy bank with suspicion, you can relax. It's not plotting your downfall, it's just a ceramic swine. But how did we end up here? Well, it's all Greek to me, or rather, it's all about the Greek. The New Testament was originally written in Greek, and the word for root in this verse is rhiza. While it can mean root, it can also mean origin or source, which gives us a slightly different perspective. So the verse isn't saying that money itself is evil, but rather that the love of money can lead to all sorts of nasty stuff. It's a bit like saying chocolate is the root of all weight gain. It's not the chocolate's fault, folks. It's our inability to resist its sweet, sweet allure. Speaking of sweet allure, let's move on to our next myth. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Now, it might come as a shock to some of you, but this isn't actually a Bible verse. It's a common misattribution, kind of like how people think Frankenstein is the name of the monster, not the doctor. Sorry to burst your bubble, but we're here to seek truth, not maintain misconceptions. The phrase, spare the rod, spoil the child, actually comes from a 17th century poem by Samuel Butler. But it's likely based on Proverbs 13:24, which says, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." And Proverbs 22:15, which adds, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him." Now, before you start thinking the Bible is advocating for corporal punishment, let's take a step back. The Hebrew word for rod in these verses is shebet. which can also mean scepter, staff, or club. In ancient times, it was a symbol of authority, not necessarily a tool for spanking. So these verses are more about the importance of parental guidance and discipline, not about whacking your kids when they misbehave. It's kind of like when your mom says, "Wait until your father gets home." She's not suggesting dad's going to unleash a can of whoop-ass, but rather that there will be a serious discussion about your actions. So as we've seen today, when it comes to the Bible, things aren't always as they seem. A verse that seems straightforward in English might have a completely different meaning in the original Greek or Hebrew, and that's why biblical scholarship is so important. It allows us to peel back the layers of translation and interpretation to get at the heart of what the text is really saying. But remember, folks, we're not here to tell you what to believe. We're just here to provide a little context, a little insight, and hopefully knowledge. So the next time you hear someone spouting off about the evils of money or the importance of sparing the rod, you'll have a few fun facts to share. So remember, folks, the devil is in the details, or in this case, the translation. Now buckle up as we venture into the realm of metaphors and symbolism. It's like an epic quest, but with fewer dragons. Today we're going to debunk two major myths that have been the source of much debate and misunderstanding. The world was created in 6 literal days, and the rapture. We'll unravel the metaphorical meanings behind these concepts and how they've been misrepresented in modern interpretations. Let's start with the first myth. Many people believe that the Bible insists the world was created in 6 literal days. This statement, however, is a bit more complex than it appears. The Hebrew word for day is yom, and it can mean different lengths of time, not just a 24-hour period. It's like saying back in my day or in the day of the dinosaurs. You're not talking about one specific day, right? So in this context, even God appreciates a flexible work schedule. Moreover, St. Augustine, an early Christian theologian, argued that the 6 days of creation in Genesis were not ordinary days, but rather a single divine day. This divine day is a metaphor for God's timeless, unchanging nature. So it seems like our ancient theologians were the original mythbusters, way before it was cool. Now, let's move on to our second myth, the rapture. This is a concept that has been popularized by modern interpretations, especially in pop culture, and has led to some, let's say, interesting theories, like how your missing sock from the laundry is not proof of the rapture. The term rapture does not appear in the Bible. The concept is actually derived from a passage in Thessalonians where believers are caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord. However, the interpretation of this event varies widely among theologians. Some see it as a literal future event, while others perceive it as a spiritual metaphor representing unity with Christ. It's crucial to note that theology is not a one-size-fits-all field. There are as many interpretations as there are theologians, and that's part of what makes it so fascinating. It's like a divine book club, where everyone has a different take on the same text and no one can agree on the ending. To wrap it up, these two myths show us that the Bible isn't just a history book. It's a treasure trove of metaphorical wisdom, overflowing with poetic language and symbolic narratives. When we read the Bible only literally, we miss out on its rich metaphorical landscape. It's like reading Moby Dick and thinking it's just about a guy who really hates whales. You're missing the deeper meaning. So the next time you hear someone say that the world was created in 6 literal days or that the rapture is imminent, remember to dig a little deeper, look beyond the surface and explore the metaphorical meanings. You might be surprised at what you find. To quote the great theologian Origen, the scriptures were of little use to those who understood them as they were written. So let's continue to ask questions, seek understanding, and find humor in our journey through the world of theology. So as we can see, the Bible is not just a history book, it's a treasure trove of metaphorical wisdom. And remember, not everything that glitters is the rapture. Well, that was quite the theological roller coaster ride. Let's take a quick breather and recap. We've navigated the lush landscapes of Genesis only to discover it's not an apple that's the troublemaker, but a nondescript fruit. So maybe it's time we stop giving apples a bad rap, eh? And let's not forget our friend Jonah, who had quite the adventure, not with a whale, but with a great fish. Now that's a fish tale to top all others. Then we ventured into the realm of translation, where a love for money, not money itself, was revealed as the root of all kinds of evils. So rest assured your piggy bank isn't the villain in your life story, and let's not forget the infamous "spare the rod, spoil the child," a saying that's as biblical as ancient parenting blogs. How about that for a plot twist? Finally, we dove headfirst into metaphorical waters where days could mean eras and the world's creation story took on a whole different hue. Who knew ancient theologians were the original mythbusters, right? And the rapture? Well, it seems we've got more concerns with left behind laundry than being left behind. But what's the point of all this myth-busting, you ask? It's simple, really. It's about making theology accessible and engaging. It's about peeling away layers of misunderstanding and seeing the Bible for what it truly is. A rich tapestry of stories, teachings, and wisdom that speaks to us across centuries. So as you journey through your own theological explorations, remember this: question everything, investigate with an open mind. So keep your faith curious, your questions honest and sincere. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on our journey through history and theology on Instagram at christianity.unmasked, on X at Christiani82002, as well as on Facebook and YouTube, all under Christianity Unmasked. Make sure to like and subscribe. And remember, if you hear a myth, don't just accept it, ask and investigate.